1939, a few months before the start of the Second World War, Nazi Germany. After approximately 304,000 Jews emigrated, only about 214,000 of them remain in the country. 6 years of Nazi-sponsored legislation have marginalized and disenfranchised Germany's Jewish citizenry and have expelled Jews from their professions and from commercial life. Only about 16% of the Jewish breadwinners have steady employment of any kind, and the worst is yet to come. After the outbreak of the Second World War, which begins on the 1st of September 1939, Nazi anti-Jewish policy becomes even more radical. The war brings accelerated persecution, deportation, and later mass murder to the Jews of Germany. The responsibility for solving the so-called Jewish question, which is the annihilation of the European Jews, belongs to the SS. One of its earliest members, who will become notorious as one of the most sadistic commandants in the history of concentration camps, is Egon Zill. Egon Gustav Adolf Zill was born on the 28th of March 1906 in Plauen, then part of the German Empire. His father was a brewer who was severely injured in the First World War, and as such, Egon, after 8 years of elementary school, was apprenticed to a baker at an early age in order to bring in much-needed money to the family. In 1923, Zill became a member of the Nazi Party and its paramilitary organization, the SA. 3 years later, in 1926, he joined the SS with number 535, one of the lowest membership numbers. On the 30th of January 1933, Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany by President Paul von Hindenburg. The following year, Egon Zill got married. His wife had been a member of various National Socialist organizations since the mid-1920s, and the marriage produced 3 children. It was not until 1934 that Egon Zill became a full-time SS man and began his career in concentration camps. What in the modern sense distinguishes a concentration camp from a prison is that it functions outside of a judicial system, and the prisoners are not indicted or convicted of any crime by judicial process. The major purpose of the earliest concentration camps during the 1930s was to imprison and intimidate the leaders of political, social, and cultural movements that the Nazis perceived to be a threat to the survival of the regime. These people were incarcerated for indefinite amounts of time. The other 2 main purposes were to eliminate individuals and small targeted groups of individuals by murder, away from the public and judicial review, and to exploit forced labor of the prisoner population. In the weeks after the Nazis came to power, the SA, the SS, the police and local civilian authorities organized numerous detention camps to incarcerate real and perceived political opponents of Nazi policy. German authorities established camps all over Germany on an ad hoc basis to handle the masses of people arrested as alleged subversives. The SS established larger camps in Oranienburg, north of Berlin, Esterwergen near Hamburg, Dachau northwest of Munich, and Lichtenberg in Saxony. However, in 1937, only 4 concentration camps were left: Dachau near Munich, Sachsenhausen near Berlin, Buchenwald near Weimar, and Lichtenberg near Marsberg in Saxony for female prisoners. Egon Zill served successively in Honstein, Sachsenberg, Dachau, Lichtenberg, and Ravensbrück concentration camps. Ravensbrück, opened in May 1939, was the only major women's camp established by the Nazi regime. Egon Zill was deployed at Ravensbrück from its opening and held a position of commander's adjutant. Despite having his own wife, Zill, a sexual deviant, was known for sexually harassing and brutally abusing the female prisoners. Once he even contracted a venereal disease. Zill, who due to his short stature was given the nickname Little Zill, remained in Ravensbrück until December 1939. The Second World War started on the 1st of September 1939 when Nazi Germany invaded Poland. On the 1st of December of the same year, Zill was deployed in Dachau concentration camp, holding a position of protective custody camp leader. The protective custody camp section oversaw the prisoners' complex and was ruled by the SS Death's Head units. The SS Death's Head units, named for the skull and crossbones symbol worn on the right collar of their uniforms, was established in 1934 by Theodor Eicke, the first Commandant of Dachau and later inspector of concentration camps. It was an independent unit within the SS responsible for administering the Nazi concentration and extermination camps throughout Germany and later in occupied Europe. The units were trained to conduct themselves with strict discipline and cruelty, and to view the prisoners under their guard as enemies of the state who should be destroyed if possible. They were responsible for facilitating what the Nazis called the final solution, known since the war as the Holocaust, which was the genocide of Jews in Europe. Having received his Death's Head unit training in Dachau, Zill was familiar with all the terrors the camp had to offer its inmates. He gradually climbed up the camp hierarchy, owing these promotions to the cruelty and sadism with which he treated the prisoners. Zill's behavior in Dachau and each subsequent camp was more and more brutal. At Dachau, not only did Zill devise new and organized methods of torture for the prisoners, but he took joy in taking part in the punishment personally, or else watching from the sidelines as the prisoners died at the hands of equally sadistic guards. Zill thrived on watching men be beaten, drowned, hanged, and broken until their bodies were unrecognizable masses of bone and skin. A tag attached to their toes listed an identification number, so they could be properly recorded in the record books as having died from a heart attack or some other medical ailment. On one occasion, the corpses of Soviet prisoners of war murdered in Herbertshausen were brought to the Dachau camp crematorium. Herbertshausen was a shooting range located 2 kilometers north of Dachau, where between 1941 and 1942, more than 4,000 Soviet prisoners were murdered. When one of the capos there asked Egon Zill where to store the ashes, Zill told him, "Just dump the dirt of these Bolshevik swines." Witnesses also testified that Zill personally tortured Soviet prisoners, who were made to parade naked in front of him. He mercilessly tortured them with a whip, and then selected victims from among them, who he then personally shot. He was also seen tying the prisoners to trees and then setting a dog on their genitals. At Dachau, Egon Zill had his dogs trained to react to the raising of his arm. On special amusement days, Zill would have a table of food placed in front of the starving prisoners, who were made to stand to attention. If a person were to relax their body, the dogs would react automatically. As time went by and Zill became impatient, he raised his arm signaling the dogs into action. They then attacked the genital areas of the prisoners until they were dead. At this point, Zill would finally leave the scene. Another common pastime for Egon Zill and the SS staff at Dachau was having the Jewish prisoners sing anti-Semitic songs as they dug pits to be filled with stones, only to be forced to dig the stones up again and to use to fill other pits. At other times, they would bind prisoners' hands and feet and have them crawl on the ground, grunting like pigs. As the prisoners approached the pigsty, food was put out for their meal to be eaten by the pigs. The SS man stood watching as the bound prisoners fought with the pigs for the food. This type of torture was used mostly with Jews, priests, Jehovah's Witnesses, and Poles. In the autumn of 1941, Zill selected a Soviet prisoner of war from a group because he had a lichen planus on his face. Even though this disease is not contagious, Zill personally led him to the previously mentioned Herbertshausen firing range for execution. The group containing the Soviet prisoner of war was initially scheduled to be executed, but was later pardoned and assigned to work in the quarries. Zill made a selection here on his own initiative. A similar case happened in November 1940. When the work detail troops passed through the camp gate on the morning of the 18th of November, Zill pointed to 2 prisoners and said to Karl Kapp, who was a senior capo in the garage construction work detail, "In the evening, I don't want to see those 2 prisoners alive." When they returned that evening, the troop of this work detachment drove the 2 dead back to the camp in wheelbarrows. When Kapp reported the arrival of the 2 dead, Zill replied, "That's what I call prompt execution of an order." In December 1941, Zill succeeded Hermann Pister as commander of the Hinzert concentration camp, which remained mainly autonomous until the 21st of November 1944, when it was administratively linked to the Buchenwald concentration camp. Between 1939 and 1945, 13,600 political prisoners between the ages of 13 and 80 were imprisoned at Hinzert. Many were in transit towards larger concentration camps, where most would be killed. However, many prisoners were executed at Hinzert. Prisoners were housed in 4 barracks, each containing 2 spaces that in turn contained 26 bunk beds for the projected capacity of 208 prisoners. Later, straw mattresses were added to increase the total capacity to 560. The camp was administered, run, and guarded mainly by the SS, who, according to the Hinzert survivors, were notorious for their brutality and viciousness. Prisoners sometimes had to stand still for hours facing the master's punishment. The roll call area was also used as a drill and exercise area, where prisoners had to jump up and down at 4:30 a.m. to the sound of a drum. In April 1942, Zill became the commandant of the Natzweiler-Struthof concentration camp, which was the only concentration camp established by the Germans in the territory of pre-war France, about 31 miles southwest of Strasbourg. In mid-September 1942, Egon Zill became a commandant of the Flossenbürg concentration camp near the German border with pre-war Czechoslovakia, then the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia. Flossenbürg's original purpose was to exploit the forced labor of prisoners for the production of granite for Nazi construction projects. Until mid-1943, when the camp became a key supplier of Messerschmitt Bf 109 aircraft parts, the quarry occupied the labor of about half the prisoner population. At Flossenbürg, the Germans created such harsh living conditions for the prisoners that they often committed suicide. The camp's Nazi personnel would often carry out executions, punish the prisoners with whipping, and order long and extremely tiring roll calls. Zill was replaced in April 1943 by Max Kögel, after being judged ineffective as a commandant. The move followed letters of complaint to General Plenipotentiary for Labor Deployment Fritz Saukel from the villagers about the high standards of living enjoyed by camp guards and their wives, in contrast to the impoverished standards in the village, as well as a culture of corruption amongst the guards. In August 1943, Zill was transferred to the 7th SS Volunteer Mountain Division, Prinz Eugen, which was a mountain infantry division of the Waffen-SS which from 1942 to 1945 fought a counterinsurgency campaign against communist-led Yugoslav partisan resistance forces in occupied Yugoslavia. The Waffen-SS was the military branch of the SS. From the point of view of his military superiors, Zill did not stand the test, and assessments confirmed that he had had no basic training and that he had insufficient military and tactical skills. Zill later served in the 23rd Waffen Mountain Division of the SS Kammer. Elements of the division fought briefly against the Soviet forces in southern Hungary in early October 1944, alongside the 31st SS Volunteer Grenadier Division. It was in October 1944 when Zill suggested the idea that camp inmates who had been indoctrinated into Nazism should be allowed to fight for the Waffen-SS in return for their freedom. The suggestion was taken up by the Nazi officer and pedophile Oskar Dirlewanger and led to the transfer of prisoners to the Dirlewanger Brigade, which consisted of convicted criminals. After the end of the war, Egon Zill went into hiding, changing his name to Willy Sonntag. However, after Zill put his real name on the birth certificate of his illegitimate child, he was exposed. On the 26th of August 1952, an arrest warrant was issued for Zill, and after 8 months of searching, he was arrested in Hamburg on the 24th of April 1953 and brought to a West German court. According to post-war investigations by the Munich Public Prosecutor's Office, Zill tortured numerous prisoners in Dachau, and some of the prisoners died as a result of the abuse. The witnesses testified in the jury that Zill had actively called for the killing of prisoners on several occasions or had initiated the killing himself. In 1955, a court in Munich sentenced him to the highest penalty in West Germany, life imprisonment. But after an appeal hearing in December 1961, the sentence was reduced to only 15 years imprisonment. In prison, officials noted that Zill showed a lack of remorse for his criminal past, and he attracted attention for his violent behavior towards fellow prisoners. However, Zill behaved decently and modestly towards the prison officers. In the end, Egon Zill was released from prison in 1963. Zill was 68 years old when he died on the 23rd of October 1974 in the city of Dachau, near the camp where he had once served. There were no tears shed for Egon Zill. Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.